Good afternoon or evening, depending on what side of the pond you're on, and welcome to another special Belarus episode of Across the Pitch. My name is Phil Kennedy, and I have Jonny Hibbard and Ed Zalaski joining me again. It's been about a month since we talked about the Belarus League, and I'm going to be 100% honest that with the Phoenix Rising and the USL Championship and all the coverage that I've been doing with Phoenix Rising between the articles and the podcast, I have not had quite as much time to catch up on the Belarus League over the past month. So Jonny and Ed are going to tell me about everything that I've missed out on. And welcome back to the show, guys. It's a pleasure to have you guys on, as always.
Hi.
Thanks again for having me.
So I think I'll kick off by saying that the transfer window's been and gone. And I have to say, I mean, you know, when they have those things about unpopular football opinions, here's mine. I think players should be league tied in a league for the season, the same way that they would be cup tied. So I'm not really a fan of this thing, you know, the best striker in the league came and played at your stadium, scored 2 goals against you, and 3 months later he's back with someone else doing the same, you know? And I know that's a lot of people quite like all the transfer business, but I often feel that it kind of distorts the story a little bit. And it's definitely done that in the case of Belarus, because we had, this fascinating story unfolding of Energetic and their kind of Moneyball philosophy about how they could, win the league on a shoestring. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like a debt had to be paid or something. And they have lost David Tway to Dynamo Brest. They've lost Yakshaboev. There was something really weird that they apparently weren't paying Yakshaboev anything. So I have no idea how they got him. But Yakshaboev has gone to Shakhtar Solidgorsk. And Umarov, who is a player from Uzbekistan who scored a wonder long-range goal away to Bate in Energetic's 1-0 win at Bate. He's officially been signed by Bate and then loaned back to Energetic. And what I found really weird about that was they actually had a new player presentation with the Bate shirt and everything, and then off you go back to Energetic. But anyway, it's clearly unsettled them, and they haven't won since. So I think that's like a real thing.
NBA, I just say that's like at the NBA draft when a team drafts and trades him. They make him take a picture of the team that drafted him's hat for some reason, just to make it official or something like that. It reminded me of that. One other thing I wanted to say, Jonny, is I think we need to get some kind of a sound effect and have unpopular football opinion be like a segment we have on the show now.
Okay.
And I'll just kind of counter it, so I do enjoy all of the transfers, but I think, really the gutting of Energetic was the biggest story of the transfer window. With the Yakshaboev, it really sounded like there was something with the agents or something, however he ended up there. And so now, I mean, this is back-to-back seasons where Energetic have really lost probably the best striker in the league. They lost Ilya Shkurin at the end of the 2019 season. He's with Viktor Goncharenko, another Belarusian manager in Russia at CSKA Moscow. So, I mean, they've looked not very good. They got beaten handily this past weekend by Torpedo. I don't think they'll be in any trouble because I think the bottom of the league is still significantly worse. You won't see them challenging for the title. I think they're really out of the title race now.
A word that comes to mind that I wanted to ask you guys about is a term that at least is used on this side of the pond is collusion. And I think that it's actually something that's more commonly seen in like fantasy football or something when 2 owners will get together and some guy will trade their best player to try and win the money in the fantasy football league. I mean, are you thinking that there's like some kind of a collusion between teams, or Jonny, you mentioned something like you did? Is this like send us your striker, or you'll be sleeping with the fishes kind of deal?
I didn't quite mean it in that way. I suppose I meant that I think there is an opaque hierarchy of clubs.
Yeah.
Almost in a way that they won't let Energetic win the league because that's not what Bate and Shakhtar and the others want. So I think there's an element of that. In terms of real kind of malpractice going on, I think, Ed, you know a bit about this because in Isloc's history, there was a big case of this, wasn't there?
Yeah,
match fixing.
A few years ago, several players were accused of match fixing and were banned for life. Alexander Alamona, who played for Bate for a while. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything like that here. I mean, if you want collusion, the closest example you could get is with the two clubs from Brest with, essentially the same owner.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like that here. It really was just the bigger clubs exercising their financial power over the smaller clubs. And
so this is a Crystal Palace selling to Man City situation, kind of.
I feel like it's a bit worse, though. I mean, perhaps it isn't worse. Perhaps I'm just kind of used to it in the Premier League and got kind of taken in by this romantic kind of story unfolding in Belarus, and then kind of got the reality check that it's, it would have the same as anywhere else.
If Leicester City had sold Jamie Vardy 10 games left in the 2017 season.
Yeah, well, as an aside, that it's a great credit to Jamie Vardy in the title-winning season that his head wasn't turned in January of that year and he wasn't demanding a transfer. But quite often that will happen, won't it?
And especially for these players, they're not on huge salaries. So if you get a club like a Bate or a Shakhtar or even a Dinamo Minsk that have a little more secure funding, you're going to jump at that chance. A career is only so short, and especially for these guys, they're, what a Premier League player makes in a week, these guys maybe will make in their entire career.
So it's more like the Premier League. the difference between like a Sunderland or an Ipswich versus an Accrington or a Rochdale.
Yeah, broadly speaking. Yeah. And I suppose the other team that was really kind of gutted almost to the point that we thought they wouldn't play again was Smolovici, who basically lost half of their team in a week. And we were told pretty much that they were shutting down. And then Dinamo Minsk loaned them a few players. And, of course, their next game up was Isloch at home. And we were thinking, do you know what? This will be a walk in the park. This team don't even know each other. I think it didn't work out that way. And the best way, what I was saying during the game is it reminded me of a sort of first or second round English FA Cup game where that the away side from, say, a higher league or whatever, that they've got better players and better resources and so on. But the rub of the green just kind of goes against you. And after 10, 20 minutes, it's just starting to go wrong. Vladislav Lozhkin on loan from Dinamo Minsk, who's 18 years old, scored 2 very competent goals in that game in a 3-1 win for them. So the death of Smolovici was greatly exaggerated. I don't know if they've quite got enough still to get out of that bottom 3, but I think they definitely have a chance.
And Lozhkin is a very talented young player. I think it was a little bit of crashing back to earth for them. This past weekend they were handily defeated by Shakhtar Sologorsk, and they didn't really look like they were in it. And Sologorsk is about to lose probably their best player to Lokomotiv Moscow as well. And they looked fine without him.
Yeah, Shakhtar is, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. But, I would say at the moment they're kind of looking like the real deal. And Yakshaboev has come in and they've so far made him look like Yakshaboev can perform week in, week out, whereas before he was very much, it depended on whether he was in the mood or not. Shakhtar, actually, they tried to sign Jan Sane. There were strange things with his agent. Apparently Shakhtar wanted him from the beginning of the season. So what was going on there? Did the agent think that, if I get him to Isloch first and then get him to Shakhtar in the window, I'll get a payday twice. I mean, who knows what was going on?
That's kind of what it was. And I remember when Momo was with the club last year, he was on loan from, was it a Tunisian side or?
Moroccan.
It was Moroccan. And when he signed on loan, Islak had a purchase option. And so it wasn't necessarily clear if we were going to take that, or if we did, the rumor was he would then essentially be bought immediately and then sold. And that's what happened last year with Ilya Shkurin, who I think I've mentioned the 2 times I've been on here, where he was with Energetic. Dinamo Brest had a purchase option on him. They took that option, and then they were the ones that sold him to CSKA Moscow.
What I'm hearing here is I have a pretty good chance of winning my bet. Is what I'm hearing. Is that correct, Jonny?
Yeah, I think so. It definitely looks like a tighter title race. I mean, Neyman keep producing the goods. They had, a very tight win against Islak, actually. We performed really well in that game, but they keep grinding out the results with the game in hand.
They got a really slow start, and they've just come out of nowhere, and they've got a game in hand. So, I mean, if they win their game in hand, we could have 3 clubs at the top of the table sitting on 37 points.
And Dinamo Minsk, who started so poorly, they're not, 19 games will have been played, but they're only 7 points back. So it still is pretty tight at the top.
Yeah, it's like nobody's been able to break away so far. I mean, my head.
You've got 16 points first from 12th. I mean, that's as tight as you get. I would think. I mean, obviously, if Liverpool ran away with it this year, but I mean, in an average year, if you look at the English Premier League table, I think there's usually more than 16 points between first and 12th in the Premier League each year. And I mean, obviously, this year with Liverpool running away with it, it was a lot more. But I'm saying, even in a regular close year, I mean,
if anything, I would say that the Belarus League is more like the Championship. Bate are our kind of Leeds United, who might be a bit dodgy here and there, and will make them sweat. Neyman definitely look like our Brentford at the moment, making a run for the tops. So, the other team I wanted to mention that's suddenly woken up is Rug Brest, right? Who, I thought, first of all, that they weren't going to do anything this season. And secondly, I thought that they didn't have any fans. I thought certainly they didn't have any English language fans, and I've been proved wrong on both of those counts. And they've pulled off they had a run of 3 wins, which included an 8-1 win away to Energetic. And the guy that follows them, he said before that Energetic game, they did a podcast together. He said, we'll either win 1-0 or we'll lose 1-0. Well, if I look at the results since then, it's been 8-1 win, 3-0 defeat, and 3-3 draw. So they are suddenly quite an interesting team to watch out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I think Vitebsk, I've been impressed with them. They've moved up in the table. They're now 6th. They're on 29 points, so they're still close too. It's just on paper, Bate should be the champions every single year. I mean, they have the best infrastructure, they have the best facilities, they pay the best wages. There really aren't clubs in the rest of the league that should be able to compete with them. I know they've suffered from the lack of European football the past few seasons. They haven't been qualifying for the Champions League. They haven't went as far in the Europa League. So they're starting to see some of that take effect. But they are still by far the best team in the league.
Do you think that, kind of everything that's happened this year, even though this league has, not changed things as much as anything else, but still with as awkward a year as it is, do you think that has contributed in some ways to the tightness of the table, especially when you've had guys missing games here and there? You've had games that have been canceled at times. I mean, I'm sure all of that kind of adds up. Or is this just a league where like Jonny, you've mentioned that some teams play in 2-3 different home stadiums over the course of the year? Is this just kind of business as usual in the Belarus League?
It's hard to say, really, but one thing that is definitely a phenomenon, because it affected Isloch and it's now affected Dynamo Brest, who lost 2-0 to Isloch at the weekend, is this kind of, because games are not officially postponed because of COVID in Belarus, right? But unofficially, that's kind of what's happened, that certain teams have been affected by the virus. They're taken out of the running for maybe 2 weeks running. And they come back from that break, or they come back from the disruption or whatever else that's going on. And it definitely seems to take an effect. So, Dynamo Brest didn't really turn up last weekend.
They were really poor. They were really poor against Isloch. I mean, and that's what we needed. We needed to have a performance like that.
Yeah, definitely. But so I think that's definitely, interrupted certain teams at certain points, and it's kind of difficult to quantify. But, in some squads, I mean, Isloch is one squad like that, but one or two other teams, they've got a basic kind of core of about 14, 15 players. And beyond that, they're really kind of struggling to make a team. I think for those kinds of teams, any kind of... And Dynamo Brest, I would say they don't have more than 14, 15 players of real quality. Yeah, so I think it's definitely one of the variables.
And it's going to be hard for Dynamo Brest, especially as the Champions League rolls around, because they are representing Belarusian football on the continent. So I think if you want the league to improve and to get any sort of coefficient increase, they need to do well. And now they're coming off of this 2-week break. What will they look like when those qualifiers come around in a few weeks?
It probably depends who they get, because most of the teams they could be playing are in, possibly an even worse situation. I'm potentially quite excited because they could be playing Bala Town of Wales. They could be playing Derry City of Ireland. But, of course, even if they are, we won't be able to actually go. And I think it'll be, really agonizing if one of the Belarus teams is playing about two hours from where I live and I can't physically go and watch it. That'll be torture.
I know that you had some things that you wanted to talk about with the political situation that's going on in Belarus. Did you want to talk about that now, or did you have some other stuff before that?
Ed, have you got anything else you want to chuck in before we move on?
No, I think we've covered it. I mean, I'm hoping that Isloch will kind of keep getting better. I know we went with that run where it was, we lost 3 in a row before beating Dynamo Brest. But it's still been good. Slutsk, I know I was saying that they looked like they were dead in the water. Well, they've gotten some new funding, and they're up, they're 12th in the table now. So I think
I still hope they go down. Sorry.
No, I have no issues with them going down. I think Belshina is still dead set. I don't think they're going to be saved. FC Minsk looked awful this past weekend, and they're not that far. They have 2 games in hand, but they're not that far. They're not safe, and they got beat 6-0 by Bate this past weekend. And Bate just looked like another team. It's crazy that Bate won by such a large margin, and they still actually trail Shakhtar on goal difference. And they've won more games as well than Shakhtar, but they're still tied. But yeah, that's it. I think Belshina are dead in the water, and there's not that much to say. And Slutsk might make it through the year. Maybe we'll make it through a year without any clubs folding like we saw last year.
Yeah, that was actually the last thing that I had that I wanted to ask you guys about. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was the thing I was looking at the table, and Belshina, they're negative 23 on the goal difference. They're at 10 points. To me, stick a fork in them. They're the Norwich of the Belarus League this year. But like you mentioned earlier, I mean, Smolovici, they actually have a minus 11 goal difference. Minsk, FC Minsk, they have a minus 16 goal difference. And Gorodia even has a minus 13 goal difference. So the Smolovici, they seem to, even though they have less points than those other two clubs I mentioned, they seem to be playing a little bit better. FC Minsk does have a game in hand on Smolovici. Smolovici does have a game in hand on Gorodia. And, just kind of looking, I know that Gorodia, they had that one really good run where I think they won like 4 matches in a row. And I'm looking right now, they're like 5-4-10. So it seems like other than that one good run they had, they've only won like one other match all year. They've played 19 matches, which is, like I said, Minsk has 2 games in hand, Smolovici has. So I think that they might actually be my pick to be the other team to go down. What do you guys think?
I'm not sure with them. So they've played probably some of the better teams the past few rounds. So they lost 1-0 to Dynamo Minsk. They lost 4-1 to Shakhtar, but they got a 2-2 draw with Vitebsk, and they beat Belshina. I think a lot of their problems again come down to funding. I think they will be able to save themselves, but now that I've said that, I like seeing them in the league. I like having the little village team, but now that I'd like to see them stay safe.
Yeah, I was going to come in on FC Minsk actually, because one of the points that's come up in chats and things is that that attachment to the home ground, which is so, certainly in English football, is just so central to your team. Your team's home ground is your temple, and that it's just not quite the same emotional attachment in a league like Belarus. And I know in Ukraine, there were teams like Obolon that bounced around 3 or 4 different stadiums while I was there. But I was going to say, I think FC Minsk it's again one of those teams that's suffered from the sort of COVID postponements and, struggled to recover after that. But also, Minsk,
they were the first team that FC Minsk, they were the first team that had games suspended. And that's the reason they have those 2 games in hand, right? Is because of those suspended matches.
Yeah, and they haven't really put in a good performance since then. If we look at Minsk, but also Isloch, who shared their ground, they haven't really thrived since they've gone to the Tractor Stadium. And you look at Smolovici, on the other hand, who were playing in, if you remember, they were playing in Barte's old stadium in Borisov, moved to this little, it's very much like a kind of non-league ground in Smolovici. But I think the move has been really good for them. It's a proper home ground. So I think when people say, the home advantage and the home stadium doesn't mean as much there, I think, well, maybe it should, because, it certainly seems to benefit teams.
So I've got a question for you guys. Higher tractors per capita, Belarus or Ipswich?
Well, it's funny.
No, I would guess Belarus. Sorry, Johnny, go ahead. I did.
Yeah. We've got this phenomenon of Ipswich Town fans who latched onto Vitebsk. I don't know if that's still a thing, but that was quite a big thing in the early days of the lockdown.
Yeah, I remember that you were mentioning that there was a following for Ipswich. Yeah, I just always like to get in a good Tractor Boys joke whenever I have a chance, because I mean, since they went in and walked League One last year, and I'm not going to get to see them play Accrington this year. Oh wait, never mind.
And yeah. I know you mentioned FC Minsk, and they're one of the clubs where I really wouldn't be sad to see them go down, mostly because they were born out of one of the deaths of Torpedo Minsk, who were one of the big historic clubs. And while technically FC Minsk were the successor of a different Minsk club, they essentially use Smena Minsk. They still used all the same. They had the same owner as the guy who owned Torpedo, and they used the same facilities. So
Yeah.
if they go down, well, I won't be that sorry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, it's one of those things that going back to the first Belarus podcast we did, it's one of the reasons I chose Isloch, because I really liked their kind of pure rise from non-league and did kind of compare it with teams like FC Minsk who'd sort of bought their place in the league, which is more normal for new clubs in Eastern Europe. So, yeah, it's something I thought about when I decided who to support.
Yeah, when you mentioned that to me, that was when I jumped on the Isloch bandwagon, if you will.
We've all got scarves now, am I right?
Yes, I've got one hanging on my wall of football right next to the Sacktown FC podcast. And the only reason I have a Sacramento scarf is because my friends Jonathan and Luis do the Sacktown FC podcast. So that is a scarf representing their podcast, not the Sacramento Republic team.
You might have noticed me out gallivanting in Nottingham in the.
I saw that on Facebook.
Yeah, visited the city ground and also Notts County. So I like to think Notts County are another sort of Isloch parallel with representing the region, not just the city. So yeah, I should just mention we had some very sad news this week. We're sending out condolences to Momo Yansane, who lost his mother yesterday. So that's desperately sad news.
Yes, definitely all of our best wishes and to his family, and a very, very difficult time for him, I'm sure. Jonny, you said that at the beginning of the episode that you had some political. Now we're not a political show, especially when it comes to U.S. and British politics, but if we're going to talk Belarus politics, I guess nobody on our Facebook page should get too mad about that. So you had some political things that are going to impact football in Belarus.
The thing is, I mean, why is the Belarus League still being played where other leagues were all, postponed or cancelled? It's because of politics. It's because of President Lukashenko. Now, President Lukashenko is up for re-election on the 9th of August. That's why, remember this happened before, that the games before are going to start on Thursdays rather than Fridays, and it's all going to be done by the 9th of August. Yeah, it seems, there's basically, I have to indulge myself a little bit because I'm a political scientist, but basically there's never been...
this is very, very interesting, and I think, like you said, this is very relevant to why the league is even going on here.
Yeah, so basically there's never been a sort of free and fair election since Lukashenko became president. So normally I think the results are just kind of made up. What's happened more recently is he used to be very popular sort of 10, 15 years ago. So a person that's really worth following on Twitter about this is Tadeusz Gitchan, who actually, some of us had kind of ethical questions about whether we should really be following the Belarus League. But what I found was actually most people in Belarus or connected to Belarus are just really, really glad and very grateful that people are taking an interest in their country. And Tadeusz has been great because he's really taken an interest in the football side of it. He is what was his team, Ed? Do you remember?
He was a supporter of Torpedo Minsk, and the club that just went bankrupt in the Premier League last season. And he's got a really good article kind of outlining all of the reasons why Lukashenko is not as popular anymore as he was. And I mean, you can see some of the blending of politics and sport, especially when it came to the old Partizan Minsk, whose fans were overtly political. They were one of the few left-wing clubs in all of Eastern Europe, to be quite honest. And a number of their ultras have been imprisoned over the past few years for political protests, and they've been targeted by the police.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention ultras because, there are protests going on in Belarus at the moment, and I lived out in Ukraine when there were protests going on there. And the role of the ultras is really, really interesting. Just to kind of try and explain the reason behind that. Basically, in the post-Soviet countries, people don't travel that much, to be honest. So a lot of people don't even travel outside their region or outside their city very much. But the ultras, of course, because they travel to every game, they travel the whole country, and they actually all know each other. So there's people who you would have thought would be mortal enemies of each other. Actually, they know each other quite well. And when there's sort of a political, mood in the country and things, it's actually, the ultras in Ukraine's case were very, very interesting because they were, from every club, from every region, they supported the revolution. So, yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting subtext to everything that's going on. And I don't want to call what's going to go on, and what we're really there to follow the football. But I'm just saying, as we do follow the football, there's definitely, a subtext, and there's going to be some, I think, developments to look out for.
Well, and especially because what's been happening now is a little bit different than what's happened before. So usually the protests are really only going on in Minsk, and it's easy to kind of isolate them and say, well, this is just Minsk. But now you're seeing it more throughout the country, where it's happening in small towns. It's happening in more provincial cities. It's not just centered around the capital.
Yeah. So what this means for football, we don't know really. But one thing that I have noticed that's kind of crept in is some sports journalists making kind of clever comments and things, a reference to the 3%. If you see 3% mentioned, this is the kind of ballpark estimate of Lukashenko's kind of political support now. And it's actually quite brave for a sports journalist in Belarus to be doing that. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So how insane would it be that I'm just, what I'm thinking myself this whole time is, how insane would it be if through the whole COVID pandemic, it's like football will go on, and then imagine them getting to like 3 or 4 games left of the season, and they'd have to shut everything down because of politics. Like, what would the irony of that be?
Yeah.
And it's not outside the realm of the possibility. I know there have been some pictures going around basically of the military and the police in Minsk really gearing up for what they expect to be pretty massive protests. So I don't think it would be that surprising to see matches delayed because of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely a reason that they've called off the games the following weekend, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those situations that's much bigger than football, and it's just, well, I mean, it's one of those things where certainly in the U.S. or in England, unless you're someone like yourself, Jonny, and Ed, have you visited that part of the world also?
Poland and the Czech Republic only, and I studied in Leipzig in the old East Germany, obviously unified Germany. But no, I've never been to Belarus, never been to Ukraine.
So before Red Bull took it over, yeah.
I was actually in Leipzig the year that Red Bull was starting to make their inroads. And they actually, before they took over the village team, they tried to take over one of the traditional teams, Chemie Leipzig, and the Ultras again protested against it and pushed back.
Yeah. I cannot imagine in American sports that's something that's like so foreign, if you will, about the way that some supporters groups are. I just remember, I was watching the Salford City documentary that they had on Netflix, and they were talking about how a lot of the longtime supporters just didn't want the money coming in, even though they were all local guys. Essentially, they just didn't want all that money coming in from the class of '96 guys. And I can't imagine American sports fans not wanting big money owner to take over their team. It's just like such a foreign concept. But yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to think, how much different things are in that part of the world. Because I mean, with the Soviet Union broke up, it basically broke up into 14 sovereign nations, and in every, they're so spread out as far as how far they are. I mean, if you think of a place like, Estonia compared to Kazakhstan, I mean, it's just, so many different cultures and nations that broke up from what used to be the Soviet Union.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and Jonny, you mentioned sports writers. I almost forgot about this. On Tribuna, the big Belarusian sport publication, there was one of their blogs summarizing basically everything that happened in the past match week. They wrote, let's take a look at Gomel, how great Gomel was on Sunday, right? How pretty it was. And there was just kind of a wink there because there were massive protests there.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, or possibly more than that. But anyway, as always in Belarus, whatever happens, it'll be interesting. And in fact, I had a look at the next round of games because that's how we always finish off. But to tell you the truth, I can't see a standout game this week. But what I will say is there will be upset somewhere. That's what we can guarantee.
I'm looking at the schedule here, and I see that you have Slutsk, Shakhtar, and Dynamo Brest and Vitebsk are on Friday. And then on Saturday, you have Smolovici, Belshina, Slavia Mozir, it's the one that's playing Islach, and that is at Slavia. That is at 8:30 a.m. Arizona time, which I believe is 11:30 a.m. for you, Ed, and 4:30 p.m. for you. And then we have Neiman and Dynamo Minsk plays on Saturday, and then on Sunday,
that'll be a big game. I mean, that's a top of the table clash.
Yeah, I mean, if Dynamo Minsk can kind of go up a gear, really. I mean, I'm told is it Kuchuk who came in as coach? I'm told he's not very popular, but I don't. Is that kind of Graham Wesley unpopular? Like he's going to actually be quite good, or is that rubbish unpopular?
I'm not sure. I think he got in. Didn't he get into an argument in a press conference this past week? I thought he was a little testy, but maybe I'm confusing that with somebody else.
So here's a question I have. This was the one that caught my attention. Is on Sunday morning, you have Bate visiting Torpedo. Torpedo's fifth in the table. The game is at Torpedo. Do you guys think that Torpedo has a shot to upset Bate? That might be an upset watch there, maybe?
Yeah, they
definitely have a shot. Yeah. And the thing about Torpedo, I mean, they started the season so well, but I think at one point we thought they were going to be, a little bit better than they are. So we kind of stopped watching them, but they're still fifth in the league. And they're still only 4 points off the European spot. So, yeah, I mean, they're entitled to do well.
You know what they look like? They look like one of those teams where they're not really great at anything, but they're above average at everything, if that makes sense. Like they're just, kind of slightly above average on offense, just kind of slightly above average on defense. And
in other words,
that's pretty fair. Yeah.
Yeah, they're what we were hoping Islach would be, I think.
and that's what it looked like Islach would be going into the season because, we were very close to finishing in the top four last year. I mean, Torpedo have always been that club that's 6th or 7th. Maybe they'll do better. Maybe they'll do a little worse, but they're always one of those top half teams, but they never really push for the title.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at their recent results. I mean, they beat Energetic 4-1 last weekend. They had a 0-0 draw with Dynamo Minsk before that. They lost to Belshina on July 11th, which is a big upset. So it seems like after that Belshina game, they've kind of turned things around. Just looking at how they've done against some top table teams, I see that Shakhtar beat them at home 4-1 back on July 5th. So it seems like Torpedo is one of those teams where they've struggled against the upper table teams. I see that they even just kind of going back here even further. I see that they've got losses against Demon. They've got losses against Dynamo Minsk. So this is really going to be, to me, it's going to be a must-win game if they want to get towards the top of the table. If they lose here, then Torpedo's definitely out of it, I'd say.
And I think the other thing, we are going to see a team hit form that we're not expecting. I mean, it pretty much happens in every league, right? So at the moment, we just don't know who that's going to be, and we're just sort of looking for the green shoots of who that could be. But it's worth keeping an eye on.
All right, guys. Well, I think that we've gone through just about all of the schedule now. Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to talk about before we wrap up?
Nothing from me.
No, I think we're good.
All right, guys. Well, it's been enjoyable as always, and we'll definitely do this again sooner than 4 weeks from now. And hopefully, it will be about a season that has not been postponed or anything like that. And we'll be talking about Shakhtar. I think they look like they have a good shot. That's going to be my pick to win it. I think Shakhtar is going to hold off Bate. What do you guys think? We'll finish up with a prediction for who you guys think are going to win the title here.
Okay, I'm going to go for head says Bate, heart says Neman Grodno.
I'm just going to go with Bate because that's pretty much how it has always ended for the past 15 years. So I'll stick with Bate.
All right, guys. I don't think that we have much chance of not getting it right between the three of us. I'll say that.
I would hope so.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks for having me.